What's up, Clemson Nation? What's up, guys? College football fans. It's here. College football is back. Fall camp has started, and everybody's getting in the swing of things. We're almost 2 weeks away from the first kickoff. Florida and Miami, which I'm really looking forward to. Should be a great game. And then about 2.5 to 3 weeks for everybody else, including the defending champs. That nobody can take that away. By far the best team in college football last year. One of the best teams ever. There's no arguing that. And last year an SEC fan. So makes me get into this video. A video I didn't want to have to make. You know, Pete and Bobby Durkins have really hammered this in, but it really looks like it's going to last until the start of the 2019 season. Something that most fan bases don't have to deal with. I know Alabama sure doesn't. We didn't hear these excuses from Clemson in 2017 when Alabama won by 16 points against us. Even though Alabama had played a slightly easier schedule and 2 less Power 5 teams, we didn't hear the excuses from Clemson. 2015, we didn't hear the excuses from Clemson. So Alabama was given all the credit those years. It just doesn't happen to Clemson because the SEC fans, they had this dominant almost decade, those 7 years where they won it every year. There was 4 different teams that won it. And it got something in their head where they think their conference and their schedule and their teams are always so much better than everybody else that, you know, the only way to truly be the best is to play their schedule, which is obviously an absolutely huge myth. And we've been dealing with the trolls all summer. If you follow me on Twitter and you follow the rest of the guys on Twitter, you'll know this. I mean, it's been an absolute joke. So the SEC, they just have to have an excuse because they have this mindset. And we see it a lot from the teams that have never done anything. The teams whose biggest accomplishment is a regular season wins, like the team down in Columbia and even Georgia, who hasn't done anything since 1980 but blow a bunch of games against Alabama. We see this mentality just to where they think that they're still superior because they play in the SEC. So some of the trolls, Paul Feinbaum, obviously we've all followed him, Dabo and Trevor Lawrence even, all these guys have responded to him as he trolls away. And we've got this guy on Twitter from Dog Nation, Mike Griffith, who is really trolling, really looking for attention. I really don't know if he's serious. If he is, he's going to have to get examined. I mean, it's hard to fathom that there's people this delusional still out there. So he's been pretty much dissing Clemson's win all year. He won't leave the point that Clemson was only better on that day. Had they played Alabama any other time this season, it would have been a completely different story. He's sticking, let's look at his latest tweet here. As he's been called out by a lot of Clemson and non-Clemson, non-SEC, even a few SEC fans for the stupidity he continues to spew. You know, his latest tweet, the attack of Clemson fans continue. Sorry, not into revisionist history. Clemson was not the best team in college football wire to wire, but it was the best team when it mattered most. And that should be enough for Tigers fans, I think. Can we move on? And this is the type of stuff we've seen from some of the delusional guys, and he really thinks that he is right about this. This is a guy who probably thought that Georgia was the best team in the country going into the SEC championship game, even after, that horrible LSU offense just stuck it up them. So he's basically saying that Alabama was the best team wire to wire, which is absolute stupidity. Like, you literally have to be an idiot to think that. Now, we'll look back and see that Alabama dominated. They dominated the SEC West. They made the SEC West look like the ACC Coastal. Really doesn't make me think like we'd have much trouble. 2 of the 3 best teams didn't score a point against Alabama's worst defense under Saban. But Clemson would have struggled. Alabama went wire to wire in the regular season. In the regular season, they looked like the most impressive team. That's why people were talking about them being the greatest ever. And this will be the last video I make on the 2018 season and excuses, but it had to be made before the new season starts because it's ridiculous. So anyway, Alabama, they dominated their 12 regular season games. The best 3 teams they played were postseason, though. Okay? They dominated a bunch of good to mediocre teams. When they played the big boys, they didn't look so hot. They didn't look so hot at all. Okay? When Clemson played its best 3 teams, which were A&M, Notre Dame, and Alabama, and 2 out of the 3 were their best games of the year, pretty much. I mean, absolute domination. And I would argue their 2 toughest games. I'll say Notre Dame was a little better than A&M, but A&M, they're a good team. So, wire to wire means from the first game to the last game of the postseason. Alabama was good for the first part of the year. Leading up, the regular season they were good, but they weren't good wire to wire. They weren't the best wire to wire. Because they struggled heavily those last 3 games, losing one. Clemson didn't lose any games. Okay? Wire to wire, we struggled with 2 games, A&M and Syracuse. We didn't have our quarterback for Syracuse. We didn't have our backup quarterback for Syracuse. In A&M, we didn't have Trevor Lawrence starting. After Trevor Lawrence, Alabama wouldn't have beat us, period. Could they have beat us at that beginning part of the year? Sure. But we did destroy them while they were healthy. They might have beat us before we had our starting quarterback and didn't have any quarterback except for Chase Bryce, who came up huge, but he had no experience at the time. So how is Alabama the best wire to wire? That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. And Paul Feinbaum, he said some of the same stuff. Just spewing, Clemson was better on that day. They're not better. Alabama's going to destroy Clemson this year. He's got to get those ratings to the point where he called out Clemson student athletes. And he got a nice little response for that. Paul Feinbaum is a troll. He's not a true football fan. He's not a true football guy. He's literally he's like the Maury or the, one of those shows where it's just a bunch of rednecks spewing stuff. It's not a true football show. You watch the Paul Feinbaum show and you realize it's not. It's like the WWE of football. I mean, it's just the lowest IQ. It's painful to watch. It's painful to listen to. Paul caters to these guys and tries to get his ratings up by talking about Clemson. So it doesn't bother me when he says stuff. I don't think he should have talked about our student athletes. But I mean, some of these other guys, like this Mike Griffith guy, I think they actually believe what they say. And I know a lot of the fans do. And so that brings me to my last point about the scheduling thing, because we saw that too. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that the ACC was great last year. It was the worst year since probably 2012 for the ACC, I'd say. And it had been really strong the 3-4 years before that. The ACC has been up there with everybody else. So the ACC's had one down year, and now people are just right back to just absolutely destroying the ACC, Clemson schedule. And it's yet to see how teams like Florida State, whoever we play in the ACC championship, Syracuse, some of these other guys will respond this year, see if anybody will be better. But last year, Clemson didn't have the toughest schedule. I'll admit it. Neither did Alabama. This year, Alabama's schedule is a joke. It's an absolute joke. Clemson's isn't extremely tough. And when you're as good as both teams, it's not going to be. There's not going to be anybody who can hold a candle to Clemson or Alabama right now. We'll see if Georgia can do anything, but they just choke every opportunity away. I have no respect for Georgia until they do something. What have they done? Their only big accomplishment is an SEC championship against a team that Clemson beat in 2017. Okay? And, you could talk about that Oklahoma overtime game. Everybody else beats Oklahoma by double digits in the postseason. Y'all go to overtime and let them score buku points. So, is that supposed to impress us? No. Now, about Bama's schedule this year, Duke's their toughest non-conference opponent. Okay. Their crossover opponents are South Carolina, who somehow still has a winning streak because they haven't played Alabama since Nam. And who was the other one? The 7th place team. I can't remember who it is. Somebody horrible. And then, obviously the SEC West outside of A&M, I don't think will be that good this year. Mississippi State's going to fall off a little bit. LSU, we'll see if they finally have an offense. A&M will have a good offense. But Alabama's schedule is pretty mediocre. So to see some of these guys like Mike Griffith talk about how Alabama was beat up by that SEC schedule, it just makes you wonder how. It's not that tough this year, and last year, how? They won all those games by like 30 points. They played their backups the whole time. They were not beat up by that. If anything, Clemson was beat up by the ACC schedule because ACC teams played us closer than SEC teams played Alabama. So, guys, we have got to move to a point for the sanity of college football fans outside of the low IQ SEC homers who have been spewing this stuff. For the sanity, let's get back to talking football without excuses every time somebody loses. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. Y'all don't see me on here every time Clemson loses, and I've been making crow videos for a decade. Y'all don't see me up here talking about, well, we were just beat up, da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't happen for real college football fans. Clemson was better than Alabama for 90% of the year last year. Get over it. Let's move on, and let's get 2019 rolling. Go Tigers.